the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner.
Very strong wind on this June morning here on High Ash Farm near Norwich. Square mile of Norfolk countryside, tended lovingly by Chris Skinner for many decades to reflect the wildlife of the area. And we're standing by one of the hedges here, just trying to keep out of the wind, but it is rather blowy, isn't it?
It is. We've got a cold front just going to come over the farm quite shortly, and you can see these on the aerial weather maps. You know what farmers are like. We live with the weather. We don't have the choice, actually. And you can see that long black line across the horizon. That's a quick burst of rain heading our way. So we're getting the last of the seed in this morning on the overwinter wild bird seed mix. It's a huge mix of large seeds and small seeds, and then once we've spread it on the ground, we can't actually drill it because some of the component in the mix wants to be in a good 2 inches deep, and some almost wants to be on the surface. So we use something called min-till, which is a short discs in modern farming, and we sort of disc it in and then immediately roll it. And we should have about the right mix for all the different plant species in there. There's mustard, fodderage, linseed, there's barley, triticale, some spring wheat. Although it's very late, we don't mind because we don't want to produce large grains, which farmland birds have a job to eat. But the farmland birds we're interested in, like yellowhammers, other birds that will come and eat the seed as well. So we don't want to produce a food crop for humans, if you like. You have to think differently, and we use a huge, very high seed rate as well, so that helps to produce what farmers would call dross, and that's actually ideal. So this field beside us is brown and all ready, the seed bed's ready to put the seed on, and they'll be here in about half an hour's time spreading it, fingers crossed, before the rain comes.
So it's all action stations, because you've had, since we were last with you, you've had more than an inch of rain, haven't you?
Yes, 31 millimetres. Yes, so that's about 1.25 inches in old money. Give you an idea, that's about 125 tonnes of water per acre. An inch of rain is 22,610 gallons. Why I remember all this, I do not know, but it's hugely important. And it brings you back into touch with nature to show how powerful nature is. And we're standing by one of the hedges here. The wind's blowing through, and a few weeks we came here ago and looked at the hawthorn in flower. May, right at the beginning of May.
All gone now?
All gone, but the berries have already set. It's been a terrific pollination. I'll pull one of the little branches down. This was the blossom we were looking at, and there the little hawthorn berries already produced, about the size of a match head each one, hundreds of them on each stem. So the whole hedge will be scarlet red this autumn. You can see all over the pollination. Because of that dry weather, the hedges are deep rooted, and they didn't really know about the drought back then. They were thinking, oh, this is fine, warm, settled weather, lots of insects flying about, perfect. And now the hedge still comes back into flower, but a different species. In fact, we're looking at 2 species here. This one, very, very popular, roses in people's garden. This is the wild rose. This is Rosa arvensis, which is the field rose, and almost pure white flowers, beautiful yellow anthers in the centre of it, and 1, 2, 3, 4 petals on that one.
Sort of a couple of inches across, so
yes.
It's quite a considerable bloom, that.
It is, yeah, absolutely beautiful. Normally 5 petals on there. Let's have another look. There's another one there, a bit prickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 petals, that's exactly right. I think one was missing from the other one. Really stunningly white, virtually no smell at all. Can you get me? No?
Nothing.
And that's typical of it. So Rosa arvensis, And there's another one tucked in here. Let's just see if I can reach up, almost beside it.
This is more pink.
It is. Oh, here we go. Now,
Oh, that's beautiful, isn't
it is stunningly beautiful. Again, 5 petals. The rose is their, I suppose, a symbol of Tudor Britain, but the roses used for the symbols aren't English roses. They were introduced from France, we think, by the Romans. The House of York was the white rose, and the House of
Lancaster.
Yes, Lancaster was the red rose, but neither of them are the traditional English roses. Yes, so this one is really lovely. Let me have a... Yep, there is a perfume. Pop your nose in there, mind the prickles. Can you just get
Yes,
it?
just a
it's
little
faint
sort of-
and delicate, yes. And it's Rosa canina, or sadly, the dog rose.
Oh.
Dog. Here's Rat.
Yeah, he pricked up his ears when you said that.
You all right, Rat? Good boy? Yes, he's running up and down the hedgerow here looking for scents. So that's what happened. Now, the dog rose is really extraordinary. It's grown up through the top of the hedge and come out of the top and has drooped down. And both the field rose and the dog rose are called climbing roses. That's because I mentioned dog, you see, and he's come here, I'll pick you up. Oh, he wants to go in the truck.
I don't think he likes this wind, does
No,
he?
well, he's got big ears. I'm not really allowed to say that.
All the
but-
better to hear us with.
Yeah, exactly. So they're scrambling roses or climbing roses, both of those. There's a third one which is called a sort of burnet rose. That's another species, and that is growing not on this farm. I haven't got any burnet roses, but I've got downy roses on the north end of the farm, and there's a lovely display this year around the edge of Oakeney Common down at Bungay. Bright pink roses, and you can tell those, the prickles on the stem, there's hardly space for the next prickle, and that's the downy rose. So now, when I said about climbing roses, there's a hawthorn tree or shrub, about 25 feet tall, just on the corner of the hedge there, where the hedge finishes, and that is absolutely covered in dog rose blooms, and it looks glorious. It looks like a rose tree, actually, because it's shrouded right over the top.
We're about 50 feet away and you can see the colour quite clearly. Yeah?
Yes, it's really, really beautiful, and it's swaying about in the wind, and so those flowers will all be pollinated, and they will produce rose hips later in the year, a really rich source of vitamin C. I think my mum used to give me rose hip syrup when I was 2 or 3 years old. I wasn't too keen on it.
Didn't do you any harm though,
I
did it?
didn't. Look at me. I'm bristling with muscles. Right? So lots to look forward to, and that's the thing at this time of the year. If we were to come here a week ago, there wouldn't have been a rose in flower. If we come in 2 weeks' time, they'll all be over as well, and then the next lot of hedgerow flowers will come in. Things like elder are just coming into flower, which perhaps we'll visit next week. So there we are, a lovely windy start to this week's podcast. Little bit of history from the rose, and we've learnt that the roses on the British emblem are not English roses, sadly. We think they come from France, and as I said earlier, introduced by the Romans probably. So there we are, really stunning plants. We've got a couple of real special treats coming up now, so we're going to get in the truck and uncover some more of nature's secrets here at High Ash. Come on, Matthew.
The podcast continues. Please do stay with us. And we're rushing around now to try and beat that weather.
Yes, I think so. That's why I'm in forward quick march mode this morning.
Just back in the pickup now, and Chris, magnificent sight over this field here.
Yes, we were then off to our next destination, Matthew, and I suddenly saw a red kite. Oh, it's being mobbed by a carrion crow. You can get the size differential when you see that. You don't realise, although the bird's 200 yards away from us, big forked tail, long narrow wings, sort of rusty red colour. It's more orange, if I'm honest, than red, although we call them red kites.
And this freshly turned soil is quite red, isn't it? So it's the
Yes.
same sort of colour.
It is, yes, and they've been following the discs when we used to incorporate the seed into the soil. They've been following us all week here, and yesterday I think we broke the record, 13 buzzards behind the tractor and 2 or 3 red kite all on the field. The gulls are not happy about this and they keep out of the way, and the crows as well, because the discs are bringing up some soil invertebrates and they're feasting on those, but they will not tolerate or go near either the buzzards or the red kite. They're very suspicious, my gulls.
Well, the kite's cleared off.
Yes.
And no sign of the silly old buzzards.
No, I don't know. They'll be up behind the wood, I think, already, because the discs have just arrived and incorporating the seed. That just brings something to mind for younger audience on our podcasts, that if you like to learn about wildlife, you can perhaps go through the colours of the rainbow. I seem to remember it as Richard of York gave battle in vain, Roygbiv, and you can start off with birds that have each colour at the beginning of their name. So something like a red start would start us off. There's several of them. B, obviously, if you've got blue, you could have blue tit. And you start to learn all the different birds and their colours. It's just a lovely game to play. And it's funny, it sticks. Oh, green, obviously, greenfinch. Y near the end there, yellowhammer. And what about indigo? I know an indigo, but I'm not going to reveal the answer. There. So all the colours are there in birds' names.
Violet might be a bit tricky.
Oh, violet, yes, yeah. Yes. we can veer off a little bit if you want, and if you're stuck on orange, that's a difficult one. I think the red kite should have actually been called the orange kite, but we didn't have the word orange way back then when it was named, so they just called it a red kite. But I'll let you have orange tip butterfly just as a special treat. But it's a great game to play and good for children as well, and that's what this podcast is partly about. Fleabane being flowering about a fortnight.
We're still enjoying our wander around the farm this morning, and a beautiful sight here, oxeye daisies, but not in the middle of one of your wildflower meadows, Chris. We're surrounded by trees that are beginning to get a little bit more mature.
Yes, this field is the smallest one on High Ash Farm. It's exactly a hectare, which is 2.47 acres. And because of this environmental stewardship scheme that went into in 2006, DEFRA, Department of Food and Rural Affairs at the time, working in with Natural England, decided to take the small fields out of arable production and put them into newly planted woodland. And this field has got a lovely name. It's called the lettuce field, or it was. And I grew one of the Maris varieties here. Maris, the prefix of the varieties of cereals I was growing, means it was developed in Cambridge, and it was Maris Huntsman back in the early 1990s. And this is the first field on the farm. It's really heavy clay underneath our foot, quite poorly drained, but brilliant wheat soil, and I produced exactly 10.1 tonnes of wheat, 10 tonnes a hectare off this field. Mind you, it did have a lot of extra attention with fertiliser and sprays at the right time, and now it's even more fantastic, I suppose. Just look beside me here, a 20-year-old, nearly young oak tree going up, still with a spiral guard round it to protect it from any deer.
Still an infant.
And look, another one there, just a perfect shape.
So straight up.
Yes, because of the density of the planting, the trees have to go up to reach the light, and that means you get these lovely long straight trunks and then a huge canopy at the top. So absolutely ideal. And look at this fellow here. Obviously got something really nutritious under us, and they're all only about 10 or 15 feet apart, each one. So in a year or two's time, somebody, probably not me now, will have to come in and thin as well, which seems ludicrous to cut down the trees that were planted, but you need to have the right spacing for them to allow them to develop as they wanted to be. So that one I can just about get 2 hands joined up round the trunk, which means it's about 16 inches around the trunk already. So really stunning. So there are little open areas in the woodland here too. We're now walking through one where there's virtually no trees on, and some wildflowers have put themselves here. Fleabane to come out into flower. And at the moment we're striding knee-deep through oxeye daisies. It's a little sunny spot. I think the trees perhaps, there was one, there's a hawthorn planted there, and the deer have been nibbling it, and it's sort of a knee-high shrub. And so, but it's really important to have these open areas, and it allows any of the original flora that might have been here centuries ago to reappear, to have a chance. So, some tree guards still here, and what I did is have a stroll through. I was repairing one of the seats around the edge of this wood. It's right beside Boudica Way, one of the main footpaths that go through High Ash Farm, and we're only about 20 yards away from that, in this little area of woodland. And I saw something special, and I had to scratch my head as to how or why it got here. Let's just have a look. Fingers crossed it's still here.
Aha.
Matthew.
In amongst all these, I don't know, 2 or 3 foot oxeye
the
daisies.
trees, and it's stunningly beautiful. So later on this morning I will yet again ring my local photographer, poor Laura Cuffin, and bring her camera down, and we'll take some shots of this together with the bee orchids that we did in last week's podcast, and it will be on High Ash Farm Facebook for this Sunday's programme. So this is, sadly it's got that dreadful name at the beginning of it, common, but there's nothing common about it. It's the common spotted orchid is its correct name. It's really beautiful.
Lovely, light pinky purpley flower, and the spots come from what's happening there on the leaves.
Yes, the lower leaves. You remember we visited the earliest orchid to come into flower a couple of months ago now, the long purple as it was called in Shakespeare's novel, or the early purple orchid to give it its correct name. That also has those blood red spots, but in the common spotted orchid, which is what this one is, it's growing on heavy clay. It loves the lime in the soil as well, because we're at the bottom of a valley here. The chalk level is only a few feet beneath what I'm kneeling on, and that's exactly what it likes, high pH soil, and it's absolutely thriving. But they're diminutive little plants. You could walk past this, not realise it's here.
What
and
is
it's
it,
just
about
into
6
flower.
inches off the ground?
It is, yes. The leaves are quite diminutive. There's the rosette, which forms the beginning of it, and the bee orchids at the farm, all the rosette leaves just went brown and I couldn't find them. But now we've got a wonderful display on the far side of the farm, again right beside Boudica Way, and I've cut a little walkway through into the wildflower field, and anybody who's interested in wildflowers and orchids in particular can come and enjoy them. And this one is just beautiful. Look at the little flowers there with the petals, pale pink, with all the little honey guide dots on the flowers, each one, and it's just coming into flower. It's right at the right stage for us to come and have a look and enjoy it at its best.
What I can't understand though, Chris, is there she is, a solitary flower, nothing else around. Why, if one grows, why can't lots more grow?
Well, that's perhaps what will happen now. I can't answer the question as to how or why it's here. Orchid seed is incredibly light. It's not like seed that you can normally imagine in your head, like wheat seed has got all the starch and enzymes and protein with it to help the seed to grow. Whereas orchid seed is a monocotyledon plant. It has one leaf coming from the seed, but the seed doesn't have any energy with it, so it is incredibly light. If you had some orchid seed in your hand on a windy day like it is today, it takes off in the air and it can land a mile away, 2 miles away. It travels huge distances because of its lightness. Now, what I can't understand is, was the seed here and it tolerated all my cultivations through my farming career, throwing all the sprays at the field that you could do, fungicides, and the worm activity in the soil here is very, very high because it's returned to woodland. The worms are bringing up soil from quite deep down and taking the leaf litter from the trees in the autumn when the leaves all drop off down into the soil, and they will bring fresh soil up to the top in order to take the organic matter down into their burrows. So orchid seed can be quite long-lived in the soil. Nobody knows quite how long, how the viability of the seed survives over the seasons and the years. What we do know is some of the seeds of the common wildflowers, which we all know and love, things like poppy, for instance, at Rothamsted Research Station, where they do plant breeding as well, they've kept poppy seed from the late 1890s, so it's well over 100 years old, and it's still over 90% viable. They just keep a little and occasionally germinate it. They allow it to germinate. Rat has just appeared, holding 1 foot in the air. He's been through the bramble patch already. Let's have a look. Oh, right, no, it looks all right. Rat, I can't see anything in the paw.
So this is living history. This
Yes.
could be very old indeed.
Yes, this is a whole thing, and I can't answer that. The other mystery is, when you sow wildflowers, normally you expect them to come up. If you sow them in the autumn, they generally germinate then, or in the spring with the annuals, things like poppies and corn marigold, cornflower, for instance. They all grow quite quickly. But with orchid, the seed is in the soil and it forms a relationship with a fungus, and the fungus kind of harvests the nutrition for the orchid seed. It's a kind of relationship between the fungus and the orchid seed, and it can be, so it doesn't need to come up above the ground. It's hard to understand. It flourishes under the ground, and the only time it wants to come up above the ground is when it's going to reproduce, and it reproduces by this flower spike. But under the ground are 2 tubers, is the correct name for them, and they're double ovoid tubers, and generally next year there will be a larger tuber to one side which has stored the energy from this year, and that again will produce another flower spike. The seed can then blow off, but it might be, which is why orchids are so awkward, if you like, they're so unpredictable. So you can have orchid coming to flower 1 year and then it's missing for 4 or 5 years because it's developing this double ovoid tuber. Once it's developed enough, it can then throw up a flower spike and reproduce itself, although it's there under the soil anyway. Yes, you have to scratch your head with nature sometimes. It's a real mystery how some of the wildlife, the plants, the fauna and flora that we share the planet with actually exists. Sometimes it's out of sight underground. And just look there, there's a baby oak tree from acorns just dropped in amongst the brambles, just 2 inches tall. That's its first year. There, well done, you spotted it. And that's a mystery. And that, the oldest oak tree on the farm sadly fell over about 4 or 5 years ago now, and that was dated at over 600 years old. So it's what fascinates me. We all get very excited about the ancient buildings, the old cathedrals. There's one in Norwich, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old, and yet this is even more special. It's the living heritage, we call it, rather than the built heritage, and that's the one that gets me very excited. There we are, a common spotted orchid. Nothing common about it, I promise you.
And you got a visit from the orchid squad after last week's episode,
I certainly did, yes. The phone went early in the morning after last week's podcast went out. We mentioned bee orchids, and I think Daniel had mentioned it in the run-up, a little bit of publicity on the High Ash Farm website, and I had members of the East Anglian Orchid Society come and view my bee orchids, and They were standing there. I've cut this mown bit in around the orchid area as it starts going across the field, and so I didn't go in too far, and they were standing there with their mouths wide open. Wow was the word that was said.
Mouths agape. Well, we're in the midst of these very young woods here, and I think I can hear we haven't beaten the weather because there is some rain now.
I can just feel a few spits on the back of my neck, and I can hear the tractor going in the distance, but it's very light rain at the moment, so I think we're spared. I'll just put this guard back around this orchid.
Very precious.
Yeah, and a little stake in beside it. It's a 10-inch wide X-tree guard, and that can get pollinated in there, so it's not doing any harm. And the scent actually is very faint vanilla smell. It does have a perfume, unlike some of the orchids which have none, and some have quite a strong perfume. But that is really special right beside us, that baby oak, a couple of inches tall. That's the future.
Just light rain at the moment, but we've arrived back in the farmyard here at High Ash Farm. The farrier has arrived, Chris.
Yes, yeah, they're constantly here, farriers and vets with all the horses. That one's having hot shoes. Look, there's a furnace in the back of the van there, and it's glowing bright red. And the blacksmith's now shaping a red hot shoe to the correct fit. Skill job, isn't it? Yes. Wow. Hot shoes. And then they'll dip it in water, and you have this huge cloud of steam any second once he's got the shape right. He's bashing it out because it's malleable steel. Let's just pop in a stable out of the wind here.
Oh, no horses, but lots of bird activity.
Look, Matthew. Oh, look. An adult's just arrived, just as we're there on the beam. And there's the nest. It's one of the artificial nests. Another adult's just arrived. Oh, and 4 youngsters have just come out of the nest. And
I nearly got flown straight into there.
oh, no. Come here.
So we're talking about swallows, and the swallows love these barns, the old and the new, and Chris makes sure that they're habitable.
Yes, and there's nests all the way down through the stable block in here, and I hadn't expected them to fledge this morning, and all 4 came out together, and they looked, I think they must have been out already early this morning, because I had a photograph taken of them yesterday, and they were very securely anchored in the nest, and these wide yellow gapes, the mouths waiting to be fed, were hanging over the side of the nest, waiting for Mum and Dad to come. But that was quite something. 4 young swallows instantly fledged.
Well, they all flew at the same time, and I had to duck there.
Yes.
I felt the rush of the wings as they went past.
Yes. Good. So that's the way that nature has
of...
moved on. I think they're perhaps wanting to come back in. You can tell. Oh, mind all the horse poo on the stage. It's a rubber. It's a rubber floor. This is a luxury that the horses have here at the farm.
Here they come. Here they come. I'm going to get out of the way.
Yes. If we stand to one side, they should be able to come in. Yes. And they're
There are many bird species on High Ash Farm, and Chris Skinner, that's one of them, isn't it?
Yes, very diminutive. Matthew, we're being serenaded by a wren.
Just one of the great delights of visiting the farm, but we need your assistance.
Yes, to keep us in fine voice, we need a few donations.
Any surplus funds to go towards the wonderful conservation work. To make a small one-off payment or a monthly donation. highashfarm.com/podcast.
Believe me, it's just a pure delight.
And that includes Jenny Wren.
Very fine voice. The parents have brought the young back in. That's a youngster, virtually with no tail at all, and a pale sort of red, blood red under the chin.
The rain is hosing down outside now. Is that a danger to the young swallows?
No, they should be all right. They're pretty resilient birds, and the only thing is, if it's torrential rain, it could actually put down them onto the ground because they're not fully adept flyers yet, and that makes them vulnerable when they're on the ground. But they've got all these buildings they can go in just to shelter, and it's likely the parents will bring the others back in here. So it's now starting to rain heavily. We can hear it on the roof now. So we've got some questions to answer in the luxury of the staves. I tell you what, I'll put the lights on here.
I've got a handful of emails that have arrived. Thank you for all the questions. And nice to hear from Anne Gorham as well. Anne lives in North Norfolk and says, I think you made a passing mention of the rattle harvesting process on the latest podcast, and it rang a bell. This week I'm finalising plans for first cut and rake off of the wildflower areas in our Norfolk churchyard near Erpingham at Calthorpe. It's proving a good year for our pignut, which is, as you suggest, definitely faring better than the usual bullies, the hogweed. But our previous once-a-year cutting regime has been a bit flawed. Despite best intentions, and tough grasses are still winning over some of the more tender species. Hoping to scythe and rake twice this time round with some expert help and maybe reset the balance in favour of more tender flowers in upcoming years. So really it's not just a case of leaving a wildflower meadow to its own device.
No, and I think that's why the wildflowers fields here at High Ash Farm in full flower at the moment at the beginning of June, and open to the public as well, where I've cut through walks. There's a lot of hard work gone in, and you can do all sorts of things for wildflowers and hope they'll survive and thrive. But generally, if you sow 20 seeds in a wildflower field, 2 or 3 may thrive, and that's all. But at High Ash Farm, we've bucked the trend here, and there's flowers from February right through until September, with the knapweed coming into flower right at the end. That swallow's being entertained by our voices here. It's sitting on the beam, and I expect the other 2 or 3 youngsters are in. Oh, another. Here they come. Another one's been brought back in.
Right on cue. They're very good flyers, aren't they? Straight in and out of this entranceway.
Yes. Yeah, just low. They don't seem to mind the horses, and they don't mind human activity. And the young one's just cheeping away above our head.
Smells delightfully of horse in here, by the way.
Thank you. That's my new aftershave.
You dab it behind your ear every morning.
Works a treat, I tell you.
Now, here's one from John Spink. Listening to your most recent podcast, I was reminded of what we kids in Leicestershire used to call cuckoo spit. Apparently a protective white foam in the centre of which was a single small green insect. I just noticed the same thing on the mint that's growing here in my garden in California. Are these a type of aphid?
Not really. It's a really interesting, you're right, it is an insect but not an aphid. It's called a froghopper. And it makes these huge bubbles. If you're walking early in the morning on wildflower fields, particularly where there's a lot of grass is in there, you'll suddenly notice, because it is very obvious, piles of foam about an inch tall and about an inch across. And that's the sort of bubbles that are produced by this froghopper. A froghopper's a tiny green insect, and it looks like an exact miniature replica of the adult, so very similar if you happen to part the foam and look in the middle of it. So what happens is the froghopper eats into the grass stem or whatever plant it happens to be on and imbibes all the sugary sap and excludes it, rather like the honeydew we talked about last week, in the form of a sort of sap, a honey-rich sap. Now, it then does something extraordinary, which is great for young naturalists, because if I give talks, it really gets them interesting and laughing, and the teachers close their eyes and cover their faces. And I said, the froghopper larva then, wait for it, farts into its own excrement and creates these bubbles. And young naturalists absolutely love it, you know, and that's the way you get them hooked. You have to be a little bit naughty.
Earthy.
I apologise.
Earthy.
Yes, earthy. So it is really funny, and that's what causes all the bubbles. So they excrete large amounts of air as well, and that also helps protect the little froghopper grub. So it's a green grub, and they look exactly like the adults, even in the juvenile state. But it was Aristotle that discovered them, and why it's called cuckoo spit, which most people will know, because Aristotle insisted that cuckoos didn't have nests, and as they flew over grassland or wherever, they spat into the grass and they reproduced asexually. So it was how cuckoos came about. So, and that's why it's called to this day cuckoo spit. So thank you for that. It's great fun, that one.
And now we've had a bit of video footage sent to us by Natasha Griffiths. And Natasha, we've had a look. It's clearly bees around the top of a house, a lovely looking country property, and almost... Chris, do you think a swarm? Because Natasha says, what are they doing in there? They're very welcome. We feel honoured that the bees have chosen us. They can stay as long as they need, but we do wonder how long that might be.
Oh, so to speak. It's B-double-E. Yes, I've had a look at the video, and what you've had is a swarm arrive, and they've set up the hive, if you like, in your loft, somewhere in there. It could be in the cavity of the wall, but it's more likely to be in the open space, and the queen arrived with the swarm and started laying eggs, and that's the way hives reproduce. We looked at how flowers did it earlier in the podcast, and bees reproduce by swarming, or should I say setting up a new colony. So the queen lays special eggs in an extra large nest cup, and it's fed with something called royal jelly from the heads of young worker bees, and the female is then much, much larger, but she's not been fertilised by a drone male. So as soon as that's sealed over, the rest of the hive gets very itchy. They raid the honey store, and they fill up their honey stomachs, and together with the old queen, they leave the hive completely and fly off in what we call a swarm. Sometimes when you've got more than one virgin queen, you'll have an extra swarm leave, and that's called a cast, a second swarm, and that's usually much smaller than the main one, which has already left. So that's what happened. So it's the way of the bees restarting a new home, if you like, with the old queen and quite a few of the workers. There can be 2,000 to 3,000 bees in a swarm easily, and they're generally, they start up and start making combs in the new one, unless they found an old hive, for instance, and they're quite happy to use that. But generally there'll be a bee's nest, a whole colony in your roof or in the cavity. They won't cause you any harm unless you go up and disturb them. And then the older bees actually are like suicide pilots. They will, kamikaze pilots, they will come out and sting you, because if a bee stings you, there's a little barb on the tip of its sting, and it can't retract that barb. A wasp can, so it can sting you several times, but a bee, honeybee only, can sting you the once. So if you leave them alone, you're doing a wonderful job, and you should feel honoured to sharing your house with nature. You should come in my house and see what I've got.
Nature isn't always keen to share it with Chris, that's the trouble. The audience, by the way, in this stable has doubled. We've got two swallows, youngsters, just looking very askance at us from the roof beams here, haven't we?
Yes, they're looking, and whilst we were talking and you were reading the questions, two of the other youngsters arrived and then departed because the rain's eased off. It's very light rain out there at the moment. So those two, I think if we look round the stable...
Well, there's two more over there.
Right.
Through in the next block.
That explains where all four are then. So they're all back in the shelter, and that's their first taste of flying and leaving the nest. We're very privileged.
Got another email just to finish off with from Chris Murray. Dear Chris, I've planted a perennial wildflower bed, lots of interesting plants, bird's foot trefoil, garlic mustard, foxgloves and teasels. It also has lots of corn spurry, a little white flower. I'm not sure if this is something I should keep or not. Is it beneficial to anything, or shall I dig it out?
Oh no, I wouldn't dig it out, leave it there. Spurry grows on parts of Highash Farm, high up, well above the chalk layer, and it's an acid soil indicator. So that tells me a little bit about the soil where your other wildflowers are growing, because a bird's foot trefoil is the opposite. It loves high pH, a lot of the legumes like lots of lime in the soil. And so I would leave it there because it's a kind of native plant. It used to be grown as a fodder crop to feed to cattle and to sheep, and also the seed used to be gathered and crushed, and it's very like oat seed. I have tasted it in the past and have actually eaten it. So is one I learnt about at college. And we're being sworn at now. Oh, because rats down on the stable floor, and that's swear words via the one of the parent swallows seen rats scurrying around. So I think that's lovely. So certainly leave it in place and enjoy the spurry. But you could add some other wildflowers as well. You've given a couple of choices there already that you've put in. And so there are some alternatives on acid soil. So the plants that you put in may not actually thrive, but you can actually try some others in there as well. Perhaps things like corn cockle that tolerates that type of soil. Maybe some cornflower as well. They're all both low-growing plants, and they would thrive in that situation if you look after them.
Emails can be sent to chris@highashfarm.com. And thanks once again for all your generous donations to keep the podcast going as well. We're going to be back in a week's time. The rain is still falling here. It's much needed, of course. The farrier has been hard at work, as you could probably hear in the background. In fact, I need a new pair of shoes, Chris. What do you think?
Yes,
what do you
I
think
think
he'd
so.
do
Yes,
for me?
metal heels, yeah, for certain. Yes,
You'd hear me coming.
We'd know when you're about. Yes. So thank you everybody who's made a donation, and that swallow's just zipped out of the stable as well, because Rat's outside the door now in the shade. He's not getting any of the rain on him, and the swallows are settled back down again. There we are. Lovely to keep pace with the changes at the farm. The swallows only arrived in early April, and already the first brood's out, and summer is moving on apace.